Good morning, good evening, good day, good night, good twilight, good lunch, wherever you happen to be, welcome to this session. I actually wanted to make sure I was here to introduce Anthony. I've actually known Anthony through the Moodle community for, I think, coming up to 8 years, I think. It's probably been a long time. Anthony has the prestigious position of actually helping look after the plugins database where the contributions are stored. I don't want to steal his thunder, I'm sure he'll explain it, but for those who attended Martin's keynote, obviously there's been strong focus being put on that. And obviously with just a slight, subtle Star Trek reference in the title, I'm sure we're in for a fun presentation. So without further ado, Anthony, the floor is yours, and thank you for coming.
Thanks, Julian. Welcome, everyone. If you could please state your designation in the chat so that I can see where you're at, where you're from. Species is optional. According to your wife. Welcome, everyone, from all parts of the galaxy and beyond. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Anthony Barrow, and just a little bit about my own background. I'm a Jesuit priest serving as the associate pastor here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I've been here since July, settling into the land of enchantment. Previously, I was working in Dallas, Texas, at one of our Jesuit high schools, and also in Houston at Cristo Rey Jesuit. It was in Dallas that I first got my exposure to music and began working with setting up their server. I mentioned some of this just so that people know that you don't have to be a PHP programmer or an expert in technology to become involved in Moodle. I also have interest in counseling. I was sent down to Honduras and worked with gangs. Really enjoyed that experience, as intense as it was. And Moodle, too, can be a bit intense at first, but stick with it, and I think folks can pick it up quite easily. There was a point when I was in awe about the code of Moodle, and as I continued to study it, I discovered that more than having dynamic and brilliant code, it really has an incredible community. As you might notice that I'm also a Star Trek fan, and so there will be a few other Star Trek references throughout the presentation. I got involved in Moodle in about 2005, and this is when I was working in Dallas as a theology teacher. And I was initially looking for something where I could do forum discussions online. And so I discovered things like PHP-BB and was just kind of looking around and stumbled across Moodle. Installed it on my own little local server, started playing with it, and discovered that the school was also looking for a way of expanding what they were doing online with the students. And so they asked me if I would take up the charge of installing Moodle for them. And so I did. And one of the things that I discovered back around 1.5, 1.6 was that there were a few bugs. And so I decided to go in and look at the code and see if I could fix a couple of them. And then on the forums, I would get involved and I would speak to people, asking questions, but also answering questions. And my thinking was that if I could answer some of the simple questions for folks, then maybe that would free up the developers and other folks who with more experience to answer my questions. And so I like to say that never underestimate the value of self-interest. Around that time, there was a patch to the gradebook, and the person who was maintaining it had not kind of kept it up to date. And so I had suggested that they merge in some of the patches that had been done in Moodle 1.8 into their patch. And before I know it, that person had left, and they said, well, I think Anthony's maintaining it. So very quickly, one can get involved in kind of maintaining these things. I also started playing with the birthday block. I wanted to try to make our Moodle installation a little bit more social. And so added that, wrote that based on the online users block. And I was impressed because within a few days, I had gotten 2 or 3 translations for the birthday block into Portuguese and Japanese. And this really showed me the incredible power of open source, of people really wanting to collaborate with each other. We also had at the school some computer rooms that faculty wanted to schedule, and I was able to find a separate PHP project called the MRBS block. Well, actually, it was the MRBS project, but I created it in Moodle to be a block. So when folks need something that is not in Moodle, they can certainly go out and look for similar type projects and see how that work might be incorporated into Moodle. I also had a few things within Moodle that I wanted to see done differently. The biggest one was with forums that I was using with my students, that I didn't want it always just to be the average of the ratings. Sometimes I wanted to be the max rating. Sometimes I wanted it to be the minimum. So I wanted to be able to use that in different ways, and so started kicking around some of those ideas and wrote a patch to allow that type of aggregation to take place within the forums, and then that was incorporated into Moodle Core. Since then, Martin figured out that I like to play with code. I like to install things and test them and look and see what's good and bad about them. And so I was asked to take over as plugins facilitator. And in that role, I review Moodle plugins. And my intention in reviewing Moodle plugins really is just to kind of support and help people to follow the best practices, to encourage them to use the right naming conventions and make sure that they're debugging their code and running it in debug mode, and make sure that any errors that are there can be kind of cleaned up before they share it with the rest of the Moodle community. Excuse me just for a second. So there are many ways of getting involved in the Moodle community, and I really try to encourage folks to participate as much as possible. This presentation is about Moodle add-ons and how to add our technological distinctiveness to our Moodle core, to our Moodle sites. And so I think it's important that folks recognize the difference between a Moodle plugin and a Moodle add-on. Hopefully they'll be able to identify the various types of Moodle plugins and discover and assess Moodle plugins shared by others, and then be able to, after assessing those plugins, add them to their own installation. And then I would hope that folks become involved in the Moodle community and start really participating actively around that plugin. The whole plugins ethos has kind of really been evolving quite quickly recently. It started out very slowly with folks just kind of adding things, and there was a time when we had CVS, and we would have folks, I'd have to grant folks access to that CVS site so that they could upload their code there. Things are much more independent now, mostly using GitHub. So the M in Moodle stands for modular. Moodle is designed to be expanded, and it has a variety of plugin types. So really I encourage folks to use what they need, and this is what the modularity allows, is for a plugin to function independently so that you can either enable it or disable it as needed without drastically affecting other systems. Moodle plugins and add-ons increase the functionality of your site. And so if you need to add a theme, if you need to add a block, a different activity module, a file repository type, you're able to drop that into Moodle, turn it on, and have it work without thinking or having to worry about it breaking anything else. So they're designed to be deactivated without destroying your entire site. Moodle plugins refers to all of the functionality that makes up a Moodle site. And Moodle add-ons are a specific subset of plugins, the ones that are non-core, that Moodle headquarters does not maintain. Zoom in here a little bit. Moodle plugin types, just so that folks are familiar with the various types of plugins within Moodle, the types of code that they can write to extend its functionality, can be related to assignment submission and feedback types. This is Moodle 2.3 onward. There used to be assignment types. Moodle 2.3, now there are ways of submitting your assignment and ways of giving feedback to that assignment. Thanks, Rachel. That's a great question. I'd love to see what people's favorite plugins are. Other types of plugins include course formats. So if you want to change the way that a course is displayed, that the materials are organized, you can do that through course formats. Themes, obviously, the general appearance of Moodle. The activity modules, if folks want to add a different way for students to interact with the course. So, for example, the big blue button activity. You can have blocks, the little pieces of information on the side. You can add those. You can add ways of interacting with other file repositories. So getting information in and out of Moodle. Portfolios is how to take information from Moodle and post it onto another system like Mahara. File repositories would be things like working with files in Google Docs. For those who are writing plugins and sharing them with Moodle plugins, I've really been impressed with the GitHub file repository on Moodle.org. It's really slick because you can just browse your own GitHub tree, choose the branch that you want, make sure to check the box that says that it can rename the root directory, but then it'll go ahead and zip up that code and add it there so you don't have to create the zip file yourself. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that's been happening in the plugins, with Moodle plugins, is that things are really beginning to become streamlined. When the tool was completely rewritten, it used to be a database activity type. Then people would just kind of add the code and references to it. But now that we have a tool that's specifically written to manage Moodle plugins, it's really neat the things that we're able to do. So I look forward to hearing people's ideas about how that can be improved and streamlined to make their lives even easier. There's the plagiarism plugin type. So to have plagiarism checkers, things like Turnitin.com and others. Then there are question types, question formats, and question behaviors. I'd have to defer to Tim on question behaviors because I've never really dived that deeply into those. But just different ways of creating types of questions, the way that they ask, or the way that people can create questions, and then the behaviors that you would expect from them, how they would appear, and things like that. Thanks, Tim. There are authentication types. So if you have a different type of authentication server and you need a special plugin for that, you can find those. Enrollment types, how you want people to be able to enroll in courses. Different types of filters. So these seem to be really popular with folks that have, say, like a media server, and they want people to be able to, their teachers and users to be able to enter the text or a link to that, but in kind of an abbreviated way, and then let Moodle automatically expand that and do something special with it. That's helpful. One of my favorite filters is the auto-linking activity name filter, so that if you type the name of an activity and in, say, a text, it'll automatically transform that into a link to that activity, so that saves a lot of time for teachers. Grade reports, so that you can display information about grades to the students in different ways. Local plugins allow for functionality that really normally hadn't had a place to fit. Back in Moodle 1X, there were people would frequently use blocks to do things, but the block really wouldn't display anything. It would just perform some functionality in the background, and you can do all of that kind of stuff with local plugins now. Message outputs. So if you want your message to go to some other feed, you can use message outputs. Reports. The report type allows you to design your own reports within Moodle. Administrative tools allow you to do certain administrative functions. And then the user profile fields allows folks to create different types of user fields that you can make as part of the user profile. A lot of these I feel are somewhat self-explanatory. How flexible are the customized reports? There's some neat tools. Again, I'll let Tim talk a little bit about things like configurable report, and there's one where you can add your own SQL queries to kind of get more information out. But yeah, as Tim says, anything that you can code can be a report, so be creative. One of the things to keep in mind whenever you're adding code to Moodle Core or to your Moodle installation that is not core code, in other words, an add-on, while it does expand your functionality and extend what you can do with Moodle, and it allows you to play with some pretty cool and neat features, there are some disadvantages or things to keep in mind to be careful about before you do so. First is the obvious one, that it's not maintained by Moodle HQ, and as a result, it doesn't go through the same type of scrutiny, and so you need to do a little due diligence on your own and make sure to test that code yourself and make sure that it works as you would want it to work. Because it doesn't undergo that scrutiny, it's more prone to security issues. I try to do simple checks when I review the code to make sure that data is being sanitized and things like that. Performance may be another issue, where it may do something really neat, but it does it in a way that's going to slow down your server. So you certainly want to do a little bit of performance profiling and check and make sure that your site is working well with the plugin or with the add-on. It may not have been tested as extensively, and so it may not be reliable. There may be some bugs in it, so again, I can't underscore the importance of really trying to test the code on a test server before you install it. It may not be as well documented. And so, sometimes people write something for their own institution, but they don't really have time to go in and write the docs for it. And so this is an area for folks to be able to come in and help out. Probably the biggest complaint that I think I hear related to add-ons code is when it's not been upgraded for the next release of Moodle. Now that Moodle is being released every 6 months and the API changes are being documented in the release notes, hopefully it'll be easier for folks to anticipate and keep up with those changes and be able to get their plugins updated. And also, hopefully, folks will become more involved in that and be able to support people that are doing that. So I would just highlight, before installing an add-on to a site, that they should certainly back up that site, the data, the database, and just the entire site. Make sure that they have a good backup. I wouldn't ever install add-on code directly to a production server. I would certainly install that on a test server first. And then I would highlight that the maintainers of add-ons are usually volunteers. And so it's important to recognize that they're not getting paid. And so just be patient with them. Many of them will certainly respond to questions, issues, and things that people have, but they are volunteering. So patience goes a long way, as does kindness, coffee, and beer. So I wanted to talk about how you can discover these add-ons. Where do you find them? And they can all be found at moodle.org/plugins. This is the Moodle plugin system. And you can go in and you can search by the type. If you're looking for an activity or a block or a course format. And so I think the first thing to ask is, if there's something that I want my Moodle site to be able to do, what is it? And how does it fit within the Moodle ecosystem? And so you can browse that way. If you've heard or read about a particular plugin, you can search for the plugin. Just put in the name or put in a keyword and search for it and see what comes up. And then another way is you can review the download stats and see which plugins are the most popular. That's what my other presentation is going to focus on, is looking at some of the more popular plugins. Yes, even a simple thank you can go a long way. So I think one of the most important steps really is to assess an add-on. And there are many ways that folks can do this. Some of them are pretty obvious and straightforward. I would say first, read the description of the add-on. Does it do what I want it to do? Does it fulfill the need? And so I think functional necessity is one of the most important aspects. If I'm going to spend the time to add an add-on to my Moodle site, I want to make sure that it actually does something for me and fulfills a need. And looking at the stats, you can get a sense of how popular it is. How many times has it been downloaded gives you an idea of perhaps how many other sites it's on, or at least how many people have looked at it. And so there's a certain way of kind of seeing that, well, other people are using this and finding it helpful, and so it might be helpful for me. I would use that if you're really just unfamiliar with any plugins or add-ons at all, just to get an idea of what folks are downloading. Trusted members of the community will periodically write a review of an add-on, and they'll give you their experience of installing it, the things that they like about it, the things that they don't, how the documentation is, and so you can look at the reviews in the Moodle plugins. Also, occasionally we give out awards. As I mentioned, Moodle plugins is a developing ecosystem, and so there aren't that many awards at this point, but the idea is that we can create awards and give them to a particular plugin to highlight them. When folks add an add-on to Moodle plugins, there are comments, a comment section, and people can kind of give their opinion or thoughts on how the plugin or add-on functions. And so I think that's one way of kind of looking, is this actually working for other people? Are they saying nice things, or is it something that's kind of more of a frustration for them? Sort of like the 5-star ratings for an app or something like that. There are other links called useful links, and I would encourage folks to check for those. The user is encouraged to add a screenshot of the add-on, and then you can get an idea of what it would look like on your site without installing it. It used to be a little challenging to install a add-on or a plugin to Moodle. You actually had to have access to the server and download it, and then put it in the right place and go through the installation process. A lot of that has been automated, and so I think just having a screenshot give you a quick idea before installing it as to what it might look like for your site. Is the code documented? Have they added more documentation for the plugin? And if they have, then that's a good indication that you'll be able to kind of go in, learn about it, and see what's going on. For those who are more interested in development and code, if they've provided the source control URL, you can actually see the code, inspect it yourself. Have they provided a way for you to interact? If you discover a bug, can you communicate this back to the user, to the maintainer? And how responsive are they? So if you're testing it and you see a few little bugs and you create them, does the maintainer respond to you? And then there's usually a discussion forum on the plugin where other folks can go in and talk about their experiences, and you can share your experiences. So if they have these useful links, I look at that as an extra little plus, that it'll be easier for you to get in and communicate and become involved with that plugin. Idea, Julian, about open badges and awards kind of becoming one and the same or merging in some way. So I mentioned in Moodle 2.5 that installing a plugin or add-on to Moodle got a whole lot easier. If you log in as an admin and then begin browsing the plugins, you will see now an install button. And when you click on that, it'll give you options for doing that. Occasionally, you won't see the install button. So like on the census report here, that's because I had a Moodle 2.5 site that I was logged in as an admin on. And this plugin has not been listed as being tested on Moodle 2.5 or available for 2.5. And so the install button does not appear. It doesn't mean that you can't install the plugin. It just means that because it hasn't been listed as specifically being for Moodle 2.5, that the automatic option is not available. But it is pretty slick, because once you click install, it'll go through the whole process of updating the database, and it'll be ready to use. Prior to 2.4, you needed to download the zip file or somehow get access to the file, to the code, and then add that to your server in the appropriate directory. And so the nice thing about the install button is you don't have to worry about, well, what's the directory path for this plugin. It knows what type of plugin it is, and it'll install it for you. If you're a developer, I still like to use Git because it allows me to be more active in terms of sharing code with the maintainer. And so there's the Git for administrators page in the docs, and I recommend folks kind of use Git to go out and grab the code on their server, and then if they want to test it and add changes and patches and things to it, they can do that and share that back easily with the maintainer. It's also nice in Moodle 2.5 onward, plugins that have been updated. In other words, the maintainer goes in and adds in a new version. Then on the notifications page, people will see that that update is available, and they'll be able just to click and it'll install for them. Pretty slick there. It's been great to see how the Moodle community and Moodle code is developed to support and encourage folks to be using the latest version of the code. Yes, Tim, your recommendation, again, to use a test site if it's not been approved is very helpful. So I think one of the most important things folks can do is to participate in the Moodle community and to really become what I call part of the Moodle collective. And so reporting back your experiences, especially if you notice a bug or an issue with some code, or you have new features, a feature request that you would like, I would really encourage people to learn how to use the Moodle tracker. Create an account in there, go in and test and see if you can create an issue. This gives you a way of communicating directly with the person that wrote the code that you're using. And I think this is a real privilege that we have in the open source community. We have tremendous access to the developers who are working on code. And so to take advantage of that access, it gives the developer feedback about how people are actually using their code. But two, it gives a way for you to share and give back. And so I think we each have a role that we can play. Let's see. So yes, learn how to use the tracker. Let folks know what features you want, what bugs you're finding. When possible, if you like to kind of dabble with code, go in and provide a patch and make suggested changes. Documentation. Again, developers like to code, and we have many talented, very talented developers in the community. But maybe coding is not your thing. But you can certainly improve the documentation so that people know how to use the code. And so that can be a very helpful and significant contribution to new users who want to kind of go in and try to figure out how an add-on works. You've spent time playing with it, testing it, and so go ahead and help document that. So on Moodle Docs, you can create an account. It's a wiki that anybody can go in and create pages, edit pages, and so this is a great support for the developers that if they know that they've got someone who's willing to kind of lead the charge of writing the documentation, then they can focus more on code. As I'm sure we all understand, time management and dealing with all of those struggles can be a great challenge. The Moodle forums. Discuss the plugin with others and kind of get an idea of what people think and share your own ideas about how it's used, use scenarios. How do I use this with my students or at my school? How does it save people time? And then translating. Like I said, I was amazed with the birthday block how quickly people were willing to take the work that I had done and translate it into other languages so that they could use it on their sites. And so sometimes I think that people might say, well, they might get a little intimidated and think that, oh, it's too hard to get involved in the Moodle community. I don't have the experience. I haven't been around for 8 years. And so I say inexperience is irrelevant. Allow your own experiences to become part of the Moodle collective. So as I mentioned, Moodle plugins continues to evolve. There was the time when if somebody wanted to share a plugin with the Moodle community, I would have to give them access, file write access to the CVS server or to a part of it. I would have to create components in the tracker, although I still do that sometimes for folks. Most folks are using github.com now for uploading their code and sharing their code. And this provides a way for them to use the issues part of GitHub as their own tracker, and so they have personal control over that. However, other people prefer the exposure of using the Moodle tracker, and that's perfectly fine. And if you'd like to do that, simply create an issue in the tracker. That helps me to make sure that I'm using the right username. But I'm happy to create a component in the Addons project of the Moodle tracker that then any issues that are added to that will automatically be assigned to the maintainer. And so just create that issue in the tracker, and then I'll create the component. So like I said, your participation, your being active in the community is what's going to keep Moodle plugins developing and allowing that to create an ecosystem that really makes it easy for folks to kind of come in and assess what are the functionalities that I'm looking for, and how can I use those in my Moodle site, and know that they'll have support from the rest of the community. Yes, normally assimilation has kind of a negative connotation here, but I was inspired by 7 of 9, and I don't think we lose our humanity. So we can always reclaim our individuality. So at this point, I think I'd like to kind of open it up to questions that people might have. What thoughts people have about Moodle add-ons. There are a couple of things I haven't mentioned. One of the things that we've been a lot stricter on is patches. And patches are things that modify Moodle core code. And they can be added to Moodle plugins, but we don't call them plugins. They're in the other category just because we do want to promote this environment of people sharing whatever they have, whatever code they have with others. Even if it just serves as being a proof of concept, it can be helpful. And so patches would go into the other category. Another area that I didn't mention was the concept of sets. And a set is a grouping of plugins or add-ons that function best together. And I think one of the earliest ones for me was the feedback activity module, which also had a block. And so if you were to, you couldn't really install the block if you didn't have the activity module. And this is an improvement that's been made, I forget which version of Moodle, where they started adding the ability to declare dependencies. But it's great because now you can't install a plugin or an add-on if it's dependent on some other code that's not on the server. More about add-on stats. So let's see. I might have to do a little file screen sharing. Michael, could you say a little bit more about where you're heading with the question about where it's going? So yes, there is a system that's tracking the downloads, and you could go in and see what are the most popular blocks, what are the most popular activity modules, what are the most popular themes, and so it is good that that's being tracked, that people have access to that information. Yeah, I had initially thought, Tim, that it was 2.3 as well, but that's probably when I actually started using it. Moodle newbie here. Rachel's post. How reliable are the popular plugins? I would say people wouldn't use them, and they wouldn't be as popular if they weren't somewhat reliable. Doesn't mean that there isn't the potential that there could be, say, a security issue or a performance issue or something in it. But by and large, I find most add-ons to be pretty reliable. So yes, there is the hope that we'll be able to list plugins by popularity and like that. So. Larry uses Moodle as a service hosted by a Moodle partner. I think it'll be interesting to see how the Moodle partners deal with this ability to install. There is a setting in the config PHP file that allows that feature and functionality to be disabled. And so, the first thing that they have to consider is the security of the server and the integrity of the installations and things like that. So the partners, I think, have good reason to be a little bit more cautious before letting folks just kind of throw on whatever they want. I know with the Moodle partners, with many of them, you can request that code be reviewed. So if there is an add-on that you really want to have for your site that has not been reviewed by another partner, that you could sponsor that work to be done and have them do that kind of profiling and evaluating and scrutinizing of the plugin prior to having that installed on their server. But, I would say definitely, if there's a plugin you want, certainly let your Moodle partner know. And yes, as Tim mentions, there is a list of approved plugins for some of the partners. Yeah, the question is if other people, if third-party people are maintaining that code, it's really hard or impossible for the Moodle partner to assure that that code's going to work. I think there is a certain amount of, use at your own risk. I've been really excited to see how plugins and add-ons are being highlighted more. I think people will continue to share the code that they're developing with the rest of the community, and I think we'll all benefit. And so I think the more that people can participate and support the work of those maintainers and just really be active in giving feedback, doing reviews, helping with translation, all of these little things will really help promote and keep the Moodle plugins ecosystem developing. So again, the distinction between an add-on and a plugin is that within Moodle there are many different types of plugins, and an add-on is simply one that is not part of Moodle core, and so we wanted to be able to continue to use this plugin vocabulary to say that things can get added in and taken out of Moodle. And then within that, you have some pieces that are core and some that are not core. So, for example, let's say you have a site that does not want to use, for whatever reason, the quiz activity module. They can disable that so that none of the users on the site can use that activity module without harming it. That's a plugin. But someone else might want to add the questionnaire activity module to their site, and that would be an add-on because questionnaire is not currently in core. Although I have heard that there is work being done on the survey activity module, which intends to pull together feedback and questionnaire and survey. I didn't realize that there were that many plugins in Moodle core, but I guess when you think about all of the repositories and course formats and all of those things, yeah, it's quite a broad code base. And getting broader with add-ons. Anyone want to share their own experience of adding a add-on to Moodle, to their Moodle site? Yeah, it is fun to create and be able to respond to the needs of your users by creating some code to something that they're looking for. Yes, the community definitely helps us to better the code. I remember with the birthday block, I had initially written that just to use text because within the user profiles, all of the information, all of the data was stored as text, so there was no date option at the time. And so I quickly released it, and being from the States, we have our way of organizing month, day, year, and it didn't take long for someone to say, well, I would really like to be able to put the data in a different format. And so then I wrote some code to do that. But yeah, I thought that was a great suggestion. Folks do give you good ideas about how to improve your code. Thanks, Gordon. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to streamline the process a little bit more. My goal, although I've not been living up to that recently, mea culpa, is to get a plugin that has been submitted reviewed within 48 hours. There's currently a backlog of almost 30 plugins to review, but my intention is to get that done within 48 hours. Any other comments, questions? It's a real privilege to be able to work with folks. I find the Moodle community to be incredibly positive and generous. Never cease to be amazed at the generosity of folks that share their code and their response to feedback is really encouraging. Yes, the slides are going to be available. I put those on, is it SlideShare or whatever that service is that they were recommending. So you should be able to find the slides. I'll add it as a link to this course here. Yeah, it was neat. Stuart, I think, has another presentation because he had set up a server where the goal was to install pretty much as many plugins as possible or add-ons as possible, and just to give an environment for folks to play and test with those. And I think that would be a great service to the community, that you can play with things on somebody else's server without worrying that you're messing up your own. Yes, the RSS feed can be helpful for seeing kind of the latest plugins that have been approved. And for approval, basically what I'm looking at is, am I able to install it? Does it kick off a lot of errors? Does it seem to do what it says it's going to do? And so I just want to make sure that folks are going to have a consistent experience when they install an add-on and that it'll respond in a way that is expected. Excellent. Well, many thanks to everyone for your participation today. I look forward to reviewing the list of add-ons that you've used. And so if there aren't any more questions, I'll let folks mosey on to their other sessions.
And hello, Julian here. Obviously on behalf of the team here at iMoot, Anthony, thank you for making time. I know you're busy doing 101 different jobs as both Moodle and as a Jesuit and so the school that you're there with. So thank you very much for your presentation. I think the amount of interesting questions alone shows how important this information is. Again, will you be putting these slides into your course at all? I've had a few people asking in the chat if you'd be putting these slides online.
Yes, I will.
Fantastic. Well, we still have about 30 minutes before the next session is due to start. Thank you again, Anthony, for coming, and everybody else enjoy the rest of iMoot. Thank you.
Thanks.